Hi, my name is Samantha Champeau from Exploring Expression, and welcome to another Product Spotlight, a series where we share some of our favorite products with you. Now, as you may have noticed, the setup of this video is a little bit different. There's only one of us today, and that's because we've already set up the game, as the setup of this game is very important for the explanation. And this game is Forbidden Island. It is a strategy, logic, and team building game for 2 to 4 players. And we don't really believe in age limits here when it comes to games. This one says 10 and up, but our 8-year-old had played it with no problems, so there's that. This was, while there's no STEM type of learning component, it is essential for team building. It's a cooperative game where everyone wins or everyone loses. And there's a lot of logic and strategy in this game to be able to win. Now, as you can see from our setup, you can see how important it is. We have each of these little pieces are places on the island, and the whole object of the game is to get these artifacts here that are surrounding before the island completely floods and we lose. Now, there are a couple of ways. There's only one way to win, but a couple of ways to lose, which makes the game infinitely harder and yet more fun at the same time. And the only way to win, obviously, is to get all these and lift up from the island. Now, how do you do that, you ask? It's a great question. And let me just say that the little instruction booklet will be your best friend. We had this on hand pretty much the entire time, both times that we've played this game, because it can get fairly complex, especially with the setup. Now, the setup, obviously, we have each of these little tiles that you put randomly on the board, and then you draw what are called flood cards. And flood cards are, you draw a card, and this one says Crimson Forest, and you turn it over to where this side shows, and that place is flooded. You can't really go on to that thing until you shore it up, which essentially means you unflood the tile. And there are treasure cards as well, a part of your setup, where each player gets a treasure card, 2 treasure cards, I believe, and they can, they correspond with each of the little things, or they have special treasure cards, like this one that says Helicopter Lift, that does special action. So helicopter lift means that you can either lift your team off of Fool's Landing to win, or if you have 2 people on the same tile, you can lift them off and put them somewhere else. Now, a couple of the other cards that we have are the people cards, or the career cards. And each little career person has a special action that helps with your cooperation objective and your team building. And there's 6 cards, but only 2 to 4 players can play at a time, so each game is a little bit different from the last. Now, one of the most important pieces of the game is not the little place cards or the treasure cards or the flood cards. It's the flood gauge. Now, the flood gauge tells you how flooded this island is. And once it gets the little skull and crossbones at the top, if you get that far, you die. Everyone dies and you lose the game. At least that's one way to lose the game. Now, to get on to gameplay, there are a couple of things that you can do on your turn. First, you can take some actions. And an action, you can move around the board. You can do one of your little special things that says right here. So like for the diver, it says, move through one or more adjacent flooded tiles and one or more missing tiles for one action. So if you look at the board, if the diver is black right here, because each corresponds with a colored pawn, they can move through a flooded tile like this one fairly easily with just one action, like it was a normal tile. You can also shore up an island, which means you can turn the flooded side back to its regular side, which is very important in this game because after you use up all your actions, you draw treasure cards, draw 2 of them to be exact, and then you draw flood cards. Now the flood cards are when you draw the cards here, corresponding to the number on the flood gauge, and those pieces on the game board, on the game space, become flooded or impassable. Now, there's a caveat. When you get a Water's Rise card, when you draw a Water's Rise card from the treasure deck, this little gauge moves up one tick. And depending on where it is, that's how many flood cards that you draw. We had gotten up to 4 or 5 before we finally won the game. And so when that happens, at the end of everybody's turn, they draw that number of flood cards. And the caveat here is that when you draw this Water's Rise card, you take all of the discard flood cards and you put them back at the top. And so when you draw one again, like this one, Dunes of Deception, if it's already flooded, like this one was, you take it from the board and you can no longer pass through it. And that's another way to lose, is if, for example, if these two tiles gets removed from the board before this artifact has been acquired, as you can tell by the fact that they both have the little symbol on it, then you lose. And that goes for any of the artifacts. So the temples, palaces, the gardens, and the caves. A third way to lose is if the Fool's Landing tile, this singular tile, sinks or goes away, essentially. It's okay if it floods, but if it sinks, then you've lost the game. The other way to lose is if, say, this person was over here and this tile sunk and there was no other tile to swim to and that player died. Then everyone dies and you lose. And that's essentially the crux of the game, is to get all 4 artifacts before any of those things happen, before the water rises to the skull and crossbones, before any two of these artifacts sinks before you're able to get to it, before the Fool's Landing disappears, or before one of your players disappears into the abyss. But there's only one way to win, which is why we enjoy this game. It's the first fully cooperative game that we've played. We played one that was slightly cooperative, but it was still a good versus bad. So this was very unique in that sense. And also, it's complex in its simplicity. It's very complex with the setup, but once you understand the actions that you can take, it is very simple and straightforward. And that's it. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below if you have any other games that you would like us to review or that are your personal favorites. And until next time, we'll see you later.